Welcome back to Serial Sessions, the podcast where we dive deep into the darkest corners of true crime, exploring the lives and crimes of the most notorious figures in history. In today's episode, we're examining one of the most elusive and chilling serial killers to ever cross the United States, Angel Maturino Resendiz, also known as the Railroad Killer. His brutal killing spree spanned several years and left a trail of death, fear, and unanswered questions. Today, we'll take you through his life, crimes, capture, and the lasting impact his story had on law enforcement. Angel Maturino Resendiz was born on August 1, 1960, in Mexico, to a family marked by hardship. Raised in a broken and abusive household, his early life set the stage for the violence he would later unleash on others. But what led him to become one of America's most notorious serial killers? Was it his troubled childhood? His severe mental illness? Or something else entirely? Resendiz's journey into darkness began in his childhood, which was marred by physical and emotional abuse. He grew up in a dysfunctional family. His father, reportedly abusive, was absent for much of his early years, leaving Angel to grow up under the thumb of a controlling and abusive mother. As a result, he harbored deep resentment toward his family and the world around him, laying the groundwork for the psychological issues that would soon develop. By his teenage years, Angel had already dropped out of school and started committing small crimes, like theft. But it wasn't until he reached adulthood that his criminal behavior would escalate. Resendiz's tendency to travel frequently, and often aimlessly, on the US-Mexico border would later shape his mode of operation as a serial killer. In the early 1990s, Angel Resendiz, who had adopted multiple aliases, began what would become a decade-long killing spree, spanning multiple states across the U.S. He was dubbed the Railroad Killer because he would often travel the country using the railroad system, hopping from city to city, without any fixed address. His victims, typically strangers, were killed in isolated, rural areas, often in their homes or near railroad tracks. Unlike other serial killers who may have preferred specific types of victims, Resendiz's choice of victims was random. His modus operandi was cold and calculated. He would often break into victims' homes, assault and kill them, and then disappear into the night. The brutality of his murders varied. Some victims were shot, others were bludgeoned, but in each case, his actions were quick, decisive, and heartless. Between 1986 and 1999, Resendiz is believed to have committed at least 15 murders, though the actual number may be higher. His victims ranged from young adults to elderly couples, all of them innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire of his erratic and violent behavior. His attacks were not confined to one area but spanned from the southwest U.S., across California, Texas, and Arizona, as well as parts of Mexico. Law enforcement, as is often the case with serial killers, had a difficult time connecting the crimes. There were no clear patterns initially, other than the geographic regions in which the murders occurred. For years, authorities struggled to find a connection between the crimes. But as more bodies turned up in isolated areas near railroad tracks, the pieces began to fit together. In the late 1990s, after several murders, the FBI and local authorities launched a joint investigation. They began to focus on residents with transient lifestyles, who were frequently traveling the country using the railroad system. This led them to a troubling realization: Resendiz was on their radar, but his elusive nature, combined with his ability to easily blend into society, made him nearly impossible to catch. Resendiz's case was further complicated by his mental health. Reports indicate that he suffered from delusional thoughts and believed he was on a divine mission. He later claimed that he was being controlled by a higher power, which led to his violent actions. In some ways, his beliefs seemed to parallel his violent tendencies. He acted without remorse, driven by internal voices, and never seemed to form a coherent narrative as to why he murdered. Was he acting out of a sense of divine justice? Or was this simply the manifestation of deep mental illness? By the time the authorities connected the dots and realized that Resendiz was the killer, he had already left the US and crossed into Mexico. Despite a concerted effort by law enforcement, he managed to evade capture for several more years. But in 1999, he made a critical mistake. While traveling through Texas, Resendiz was finally arrested after a series of DNA and fingerprint matches connected him to the crime scenes. His capture was not just a victory for law enforcement, it was a major turning point in a case that had plagued authorities for over a decade. During his subsequent trial, it became clear that the prosecution would focus on Resendiz's violent behavior and his complete disregard for human life. The defense, however, would argue that he was mentally ill, unable to be held fully accountable for his crimes. Despite his defense team's attempts to argue insanity, Angel Resendiz was found guilty of multiple murders. His sentencing sparked public debate over the ethics of the death penalty, particularly when applied to someone who was severely mentally ill. Was it ethical to execute a man who believed he was on a divine mission? Many argued that he should have been treated for his psychological disorders instead of facing the death penalty. Yet, on June 27, 2006, Angel Maturino Resendiz was executed by lethal injection in Texas. The execution, though it marked the end of his life, did little to heal the scars left by his crimes. For the victims' families, the pain was all too real, and the aftermath of Resendiz's actions rippled through the communities he targeted. But his story, like so many others in the world of true crime, raised important questions about mental health, the criminal justice system, and the death penalty. In the years since his execution, the case of Angel Maturino Resendiz has continued to captivate true crime enthusiasts, law enforcement, and the general public. His story was featured in countless documentaries and books, with several true crime specials focusing on his elusive nature and the methods that ultimately led to his capture. His name remains synonymous with fear, and his crimes, random, violent, and unpredictable, serve as a reminder of the fragile nature of safety. But the impact of his crimes didn't end with his death. His killing spree also had a lasting impact on law enforcement practices. For one, it highlighted the need for cross-border cooperation in cases involving transient criminals who travel across states and even countries. It also prompted discussions on the mental health of serial killers and how law enforcement can better address the psychological factors behind these violent crimes. The legacy of Angel Maturino Resendiz is complex. While some see him as a symptom of a broken system, where mental health issues are inadequately addressed, others view him as a callous murderer who preyed on vulnerable people, leaving devastation in his wake. For the victims' families, there is no easy closure, no clean resolution. The trauma they live with daily is a reminder of how deeply a single person's actions can alter the course of many lives. As we reflect on the case of Angel Maturino Resendiz, we must also remember the victims, the men and women whose lives were taken far too soon. Their stories, though overshadowed by the infamy of Resendiz, deserve to be heard, and their lives should be remembered. We can only hope that the lessons learned from this case continue to inform our approach to crime, mental health, and justice. Thank you for joining us in this deep dive into the life and crimes of Angel Maturino Resendiz. It's a story that continues to haunt the annals of criminal history. If you found this episode compelling, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with fellow true crime fans. Until next time, stay safe and stay curious.